Hi students, in this video we're going to take a look at a paper by Joel Feinberg titled A Ride on the Bus. Now this paper is nice and short, it's a pretty easy read, not too much philosophical heavy lifting, but it raises a bunch of different examples in a way to try and challenge Mill's harm principle and the arguments for free speech and that sort of thing. So what's Feinberg's focus? I would say Feinberg doesn't have a thesis per se. He's not trying to convince us of any particular thing, or maybe he is trying to convince us of something, but it's sort of subtle or hidden. But he does have a focus, and what his paper is focused on is challenging his readers to consider whether there are, and this is a quote from the paper, whether there are any human experiences that are harmless in themselves, yet so unpleasant that we can rightly demand legal protection from them, even at the cost of other persons' liberties. So he's going to give us a bunch of things that aren't necessarily harmful, but they are so unpleasant. And he's drawing a distinction here between maybe like harms and unpleasantnesses, which I'm not sure how to flesh out that distinction exactly. But I do agree that there's a distinction there that needs to be made, at least if we think that the harm principle is going to be defensible. Like, you can't cause harm. Okay, well then what counts as a harm and what counts as merely unpleasant? And I think that distinction is what Feinberg's sort of challenging us to try and sort through in this paper. Of course, if there are some experiences that are harmless, but that we should get protection from, then that's going to be a problem for the harm principle. And so we should reject it. Another way to do it is just say, well, here's what counts as harm according to the harm principle. And so the harm principle is defensible, but only on this particular theory of what counts as a harm. All right, so in this paper, Feinberg identifies 6 categories of behavior that might fit the bill. A, affronts to the senses. B, disgust and revulsion. C, shock to moral, religious, or patriotic sensibilities. D, shame, embarrassment, including vicarious embarrassment and anxiety. E, annoyance, boredom, and frustration. And F, fear, resentment, humiliation, and anger from empty threats, insults, mockery, flaunting, or taunting. So he's given us a bunch of different examples that fit in each of these categories to try and sort of challenge this idea that, well, unless somebody really does some sort of physical harm to me, their behavior should be allowed. So here's the quote from Feinberg that I think does a nice job of jumping into the cases. He says, in each story, the reader, you, should think of yourself as a passenger on a normally crowded public bus on your way to work or some important appointment, in circumstances such that if you were forced to leave the bus prematurely, you will not only have to pay another fare to get where you're going, but you will probably be late to your own disadvantage. So you're riding a bus, you're getting on a bus to go somewhere. If you have to get off this bus, that's going to hurt you, not physically, right, but it's going to give you kind of disadvantage. You're going to be late, that sort of thing. All right, so I realize that maybe not many of you have ridden buses to various places. Like, that's not a common experience. When I was in graduate school, I took a bus to and from my school each day, and it wasn't a long ride, right? But sort of exactly how long the ride is doesn't matter. The point is, like, waiting for another bus to get there might take 10, 20 minutes. So that's going to be the kind of delay it's going to give you to get to your destination. All right. So the first example that he gives are affronts to the senses. So images, maybe color schemes. Somebody's dressed sort of this like uncomfortable matching of clothes, or something smells really bad. or maybe there's a sound that's really uncomfortable. So I'm going to play you a sound that's uncomfortable that fits with this video or with this image. Maybe it's not going to play. Now I had this really nice audio of scratching on a chalkboard that I was going to play for you, but apparently the audio is not working on that. So you lucked out this time. You didn't have to hear the actual screeching of fingernails on a chalkboard, but you can just imagine it and think about that. And again, right, Feinberg's point with these examples is imagine you have to ride on a bus with these things going on around you. Do you think that's the kind of thing that the government should be able to prohibit or not? Now, I think some of these affronts to the senses, we think the government shouldn't prohibit them. But there's probably going to come a point at which we start to think that they should be able to. So if somebody's, scratching their fingers on a blackboard over and over, or they smell really, really, really bad, there might come a point at which you think, yeah, like this person should be punished for what they're doing. They shouldn't be able to do it here. All right, let's look at another example. So disgust and revulsion. So there are a number of examples that Feinberg gives of things that are disgusting. I have this picture here of a pigeon eating someone's vomit right on the ground. That seems pretty disgusting. But right, one of the examples Feinberg uses in this section is, imagine people vomiting right in front of you and then eating it after they've done it. That seems like, just about the most disgusting thing that I can imagine. Should that be prohibited? Could we arrest those people for doing that sort of thing on a bus? It seems to me like maybe that should be the kind of thing that it would be okay to prohibit. Another sort of category, right, is the shock to moral, religious, or patriotic sensibilities. So maybe you've got certain moral views or religious views that if someone were to do something that really shocked those, you would find that pretty offensive. So there's this example of a piece of art which is like a crucifix, Jesus on a cross that's like in like a cup of urine or something like that. Can someone just walk around with that? I'm not sure if I think we should be allowed to do that. Some people, right, think that the American flag is this really like venerable thing that we want to respect, and then we've got this image here, for example, of some people walking around in t-shirts, bikinis that depict the American flag, and there's this debate over whether or not we can like burn the flag or something like that, and that's what I think this example's pointing to. Nobody better try to no flag desecrating around here. So the thought is this character is saying like you can't desecrate a flag by burning it, but like, hey, I'm gonna wear it, and that's not desecrating it. So what exactly counts as desecration? Could there be a point at which something is so shocking to people's sensibilities that we think it should be outlawed? Here we've got an example of, a guy sitting next to two people who are kissing on this public bench. I wonder, like, is this a real photo? Like, did this actually happen somewhere? Or is it just sort of staged? I'm not sure. But anyway, you all can imagine, right, kind of being on a bus next to people who are making out, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Feinberg talks about shame, embarrassment, vicarious embarrassment. Like you can be embarrassed not by something that you're doing, right? But be embarrassed to like be seeing other people doing a certain thing. That's vicarious embarrassment and anxiety. I didn't want to go too extreme here, but Feinberg's got some pretty extreme examples of people not just making out in public, taking off their clothes, engaging in sort of outrageous sex acts on a public bus. It seems like there's got to be some point at which we think that thing's not harming me, but maybe the government should be prohibiting it. Second to last category, annoyance, boredom, and frustration. So I remember this time when I got on a bus. I was going to be riding from the airport back to my apartment, and I was talking on the phone. I was just actually, I just sort of started dating this one girl, and I think was I flying home to see her, or that must have been it. Anyway, that story is not important, but the part that was relevant was I was talking to her, sort of waiting for the bus, and then we got onto the bus, and I was talking to her, and it occurred to me, like, the bus was about to start, and I thought, you know, people don't want me talking on the phone this whole trip back from the airport to my apartment, so I should probably get off the phone. And so I said, you know, I'm on a bus, I should go. We hung up and ended it, and then this woman nearby me said something like, "Oh, thank you so much for you know, ending that phone call." And really what she was saying was, you know, something like, I would have just been so annoyed, right? Maybe not bored, but annoyed by listening to you have that conversation the whole trip. There's something about people talking on the phone that kind of like can suck you in, and you can't really focus on anything else. And so I give that example just as sort of illustrating how maybe not a certain person in a certain circumstance, maybe you don't care anything about what they're saying, but there can be those things that really just suck your attention in, and you can't focus on anything else. Again, maybe this is not the kind of thing that is going to rise to the level you think it should be outlawed, but you know, there's got to be some point, maybe, I guess I say there's some point at which it starts to seem like maybe we should be prohibiting that sort of thing. The last example is kind of intense, right? So imagine someone who like pretends like they're going to throw a live grenade at you, or even use a weapon, right? You know, make stabbing motions in your direction. Feinberg gives that sort of example. The kind of thing that like it's threatening, but they're kind of empty threats, but you don't really know it at first, right? It could be really scary, and it seems like people shouldn't be able to go around doing those sorts of things. He also gives examples, right? Maybe your shirt or your clothes make fun of some racial minority or some religious group or something like that. If something's like really kind of offensive in that sort of way, there does seem to be a point at which it's like, you know, that's just not acceptable. People shouldn't have to deal with that sort of thing on their bus ride into work or school or something like that. All right, so we've looked at all the different categories, and the thing we really want to reflect on is, should any of these behaviors be prohibited? If so, which ones? And if there are some that should be prohibited, that seems like it suggests that the harm principle is false. We want to ask ourselves, like, what kind of principle would we appeal to justify banning those behaviors? So what kind of reason could we give any activity that has these features should be banned? You know, even if it's not causing physical harm, it should be banned because it's doing what? So we would want to think about how we're going to fill that question in. All right, that's it for this video, and we'll see you later.